Hey everyone, it's Ben Hardy here, and in today's video, we're going to be talking about the used car market and whether or not what we're currently experiencing within the used car market is a dead cat bounce, or if prices are going to stay as high as they are. Before we get in this video though, as always, if you want to save time and money, the next time you purchase a car, link to my car buying guide in the description down below. And then as always, if you want to see more videos just like this, then I recommend you subscribe because I post content every single day. Let's get into it. So to set the stage for today's discussion, we have to quickly talk about what the used car market has done over the course of the last couple of decades, and then obviously over the course of the last few years. So starting in 1997, by the way, this graph comes from Manheim Auto Auction, used car prices were pretty steady. Like there were some little ups and downs, but they weren't all that drastic. And basically the general trend was that used car prices just kind of throughout the 1990s and early 2000s just slowly increased. Now there was a pretty big dip in 2003, but then prices shortly after that just surged back up all the way until obviously the financial crisis, and then there was another really big dip in 2008, and then prices again skyrocketed right back up after that dip. And then basically what we saw over the course of most of the 2010s is again some ups and downs, but for the most part the general trend was up. And then once the pandemic happened, again another big dip, and then a huge price surge upwards. And then now we're going through another dip. Well, we went through another dip, and now we have another price surge up. And I mean, the last part of the graph is pretty dramatic. You guys can see it's quite exponential. But yeah, I mean, we're not quite back up to the peak that we saw, during the course of the peak of the pandemic, but we're getting back up there. And so what this shows is that historically, whenever something happens in the economy, used car prices go down. But they rebound pretty dang quickly after they go down, and then things generally basically go to a new trend. And every single time that prices went down, the price increase that they went to afterwards became like a new all-time high shortly after, and it just remained higher. I mean, again, so here's the graph prior to the pandemic. So I cut out the whole pandemic part, and you can see the general trend is upward. So it's like price crash and then skyrocket back up, and then, oh, this is the new normal where prices are higher, and then crash, and then, oh, this is the new normal where prices are higher yet again. Now, the next bit of information we need to go over before we fully get into the discussion is going to be new car prices. So it varies manufacturer to manufacturer and segment to segment, but what is pretty standard across the board is that most new cars are about 10% on the low side, but closer to 20 or 30% in terms of their price increase prior to the pandemic compared to today. And so if you bought a car prior to the pandemic, you would have paid on average, again, depending on manufacturer and segment and all that kind of stuff, 10, 20, 30, even 40% less than what you would pay for that exact same car today. And so what this means is that not only have used cars gotten a lot more expensive over the course of the last few years, but new cars are also substantially more expensive as well. And so now we can fully enter the discussion for today's video. So the new car market and the used car market, believe it or not, are connected in many ways, because first off, both of these markets contain cars. Now, the biggest difference between a new car and a used car is, well, one thing, and that is titling. So a used car has already been titled, it's already been registered, right? Whereas a new car has never been registered with an owner, and that is really the biggest difference. A lot of people will say, well, new cars don't have any miles, but used cars do, and that's not necessarily true, because there are so many cases where people will go and buy a new car, not put any miles on it, and instantly flip it to sell it, right? It's a used car, but it's being sold with basically no miles. And then there are many cases where there are new cars that have been driven quite extensively. Maybe it's a demo car, maybe it's gone on a lot of test drives, and so it's a brand new car, never been titled, but it has a lot of miles. And so miles actually isn't the difference. It's registration, right? Has the car ever been registered? And so because that is really the only difference between the markets, the used car market and the new car market actually influence each other quite a bit. And here's how the markets influence each other. So dealerships that sell brand new cars will always look at what their brand new product is selling for on the used market. And it's because, well, they have to, because typically they not only sell those cars brand new, but they're also selling them pre-owned as well. And so they've got to understand exactly what's happening with the market dynamics. Now, they also use these market dynamics to their advantage to determine what they should price some of their new car inventory at. And so obviously dealers do not get to choose, MSRP price on a new car. They don't get to choose invoice price. They don't get to choose what the manufacturer sells them the car for. But what dealers do get to determine is whether or not they're going to discount that car and whether or not they're going to upcharge on that car. And so if dealers see that the vehicles that they sell on the pre-owned market are going for over MSRP, then chances are the dealers that sell that car brand new are going to charge over MSRP for that car, because they're like, oh, if it's going for over MSRP used, then we can do that brand new. Now, not every single dealership is going to participate in that, right? But that's a pretty common practice, right? Dealers always try to, have some sort of pulse in the market, but this is something that's, frankly become so ingrained that most dealers will already know a market before it's even happened, right? They'll know a car before it's even released out in the world if it's going to go for over MSRP used or not. And if they know that that's going to happen, they're going to upcharge it. A great example is the new Ford Raptor R that was recently released. This is a truck that Ford dealers knew was guaranteed to sell for over MSRP in the used market because, well, regular Raptors are selling for over MSRP, and the Raptor R, right, it's a special edition version of the Raptor, so that's going to go for even more over MSRP. So then this led dealers to, right out of the gates, ask for $25,000, $50,000, $75,000 over MSRP because they simply knew that that's what the market was going to be on that truck. Now, you might be thinking, well, on the flip side, if their cars used are selling for significantly under MSRP, does that mean dealers are going to discount the vehicles? And frankly, not necessarily. When dealers see that, then what they will generally do is they'll kind of like take that in as a note. They'll be like, okay, so this is what someone might be looking at, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to be like, okay, this means we have to discount this person. Instead, what they'll typically do is they'll be like, oh, but ours is brand new, right? That's what you always hear from a dealership. And so it influences more on the over MSRP side of things rather than, pushing dealers to discount things, because ultimately dealers would then just say, well, it's a used car versus a new car. Of course, the new one's going to be more expensive. So if that's how the used car market affects the new car market, or rather influences the new car market, then how does the new car market influence the used car market? And well, it really just depends on the vehicle and on the time span. What you typically see is that the influence of the new car market on the used car market starts to fade as a car ages. And so let's say that a car's a year old, there's going to be a lot of influence on the pricing of that car on the used car market. But let's say a car's 10 years old, there's going to be some influence, but not nearly as much. And the reason being is going to be the buyers going after the different types of cars. So like, let's say you have a car that, it's 2023 right now. Let's say that you have a used car that is a 2023 model year. Well, the price on that used car is going to be determined based on the price of what the new ones are going for, because the car is so new and there's not really going to be a lot of auction data on that car, because again, when you have a car that's that new, there's probably not a lot that have sold at auction. And so the way that this car gets priced is dealers will typically look at the MSRP pricing of that car brand new, and they'll also look at the invoice pricing of that car. And what they'll do is they'll go, okay, well, this is how much someone could buy one for brand new if they paid full MSRP, but let's say they were really good at negotiating, they were able to get it for invoice. That means that we probably don't want to even pay invoice for that car, because if we're going to retail this car, we want to try to retail it for, under MSRP if we can, and, potentially even, under invoice, again, depending on the type of car it is, especially, again, if there's not a lot of data on that car. And so that is a direct influence, right? Where the used car, instead of being priced based on supply and demand, is being priced based on what the new one is going for with the MSRP price and with the invoice price. And it goes a little bit further than that, because if the new version of that car is going for significantly over MSRP, then this might lead some dealers to pay more for that vehicle, even if there's not a lot of data out there, because they go, oh, if the new ones are going for this much, then I can probably sell the used one for a little bit less than that. And it actually goes in the opposite direction. If dealers see that a used or a new version of the vehicle is getting heavily discounted, like all the dealers are discounting down to, let's say, invoice, and then there's a rebate on the car, then they know that even if there's not a lot of data on that car, they should probably pay well below that, because if you can get a new one for that cheap, then why buy this used one unless it's going to be less expensive than the brand new one? But like I said earlier, this slowly fades with time, because as the car ages, the connection with that car's like pricing compared to original MSRP, again, it starts to just widen, because as time goes on, that car is sold more and more via dealerships and at auction. And so then pricing can be built out based on actual supply and demand with that car. And so this is why you can see cars that could be 10 years old, they're selling for close to original MSRP. And it's just because that's demand on that car based on the market that is happening on that car, for example. And again, you can see the exact opposite, where a car will sell for a tenth of original MSRP, because again, that's where demand is on that car. So we can finally answer the question of whether or not this is a dead cat bounce or if this is just the new normal for the market. And the short answer is, well, kind of a little bit of both. And here's the deal. So used car prices are currently increasing because we have fewer lease returns right now, which is always a big source of used cars. And the reason we have fewer lease returns is because nobody leased over the course, I shouldn't say nobody, but not a lot of people leased over the course of the pandemic. The amount of people leasing just plummeted, and it's still really low, and it's probably going to continue to stay low because, well, rates suck right now, and well, leases suck as well. And then on top of that, you have fewer people trading in their cars on new cars because you have fewer retail customers buying new cars. A lot of the growth with new cars that's going to happen over the course of 2023 is with fleet sales. And with fleet sales, you don't see nearly as many trade-ins because, well, fleet vehicles are typically just absolutely obliterated into the ground, where they're not going to be retail pieces. They're going to be sold on the used car market. And so two big sources of used cars are pretty much completely eliminated. And then on top of that, you have a used car market that's still pretty hot. A lot of people are still purchasing used cars. And so you have a situation where you could imagine the used car market is like a lake, and two of the rivers that normally feed the lake are completely gone, and you still have people going in and pulling water out of the lake for drinking water. And so it's just, the pool is just going to keep getting smaller and smaller, which means that, well, with scarcity, right, the prices are going to continue to go up. And so over the course of the next few months, I will not be shocked if I continue to see used car prices go up, at least on the wholesale front. Now, obviously, they are eventually going to reach a ceiling, and that ceiling is frankly going to be determined by the new car market, because we finally have a new car market that has inventory. Now, again, this is going to vary manufacturer to manufacturer, but for the most part, every single manufacturer has like more inventory now than they did at the same time last year. And the thing that was happening last year with our huge run up, and the year before with our huge run up in car prices, is the fact that there were no new cars available. And so used car prices like did not have any sort of ceiling because there was nothing that you could buy on the new car market. And so it's like you just had to pay whatever people were asking for used cars. Whereas now, used cars can only go so high before they hit the price levels that these new cars are at. And once they hit those levels, then obviously consumers are going to go, oh, why would I buy this used one that's 3 years old when I can buy the brand new one for the same amount of money? So I feel like that should give some of you peace of mind, like some peace of mind that there ultimately is a ceiling. But at the same time, this ceiling is still significantly higher than what we saw 3 years ago because, again, most of these new cars are 20, 30% more expensive than what they were prior to the pandemic. And so that's what leads me into saying that it's kind of a bit of both, because yes, these used car prices are eventually going to hit that ceiling and then they're going to start coming down, but they're not going to go down nearly as far as what they were at prior to the pandemic. Our new normal is going to most likely be a new normal with significantly higher new car prices and used car prices, unless demand dries up a massive amount on the retail side of things to where manufacturers are like forced to release huge incentives on new cars, which would obviously put downward pressure on both of the markets. That's not going to happen. And here's the deal. Although there is a lot less demand for new cars right now on the retail side, there's still enough demand to give most manufacturers a relative amount of pricing power. And something else that some manufacturers are starting to partake in is purposefully not building cars so that they can keep supply low, so that they can keep prices high. And so there is a little bit of that, what you might call market manipulation happening, that's basically just pushing us in this direction where we're just going to have higher car prices forever. So I want you guys to let me know what you think about this whole situation. Do you think it's dead cat bounce? Do you think it's new normal? Do you think it's a combination of the both? I'd be interested to hear what you have to say. I'll see you.